Okay, so everyone, this has been an incredible day, and now we want to recognize the fact that we are doing this summit in a place where these issues are extremely relevant, just 3 months after the wildfires, and we recognize that LA is going through a lot to rebuild and recover, but they've also been doing this ongoing work for a really long time. And so we want to have this closing session to really focus on celebrating LA, the work of LA Unified School District, and then the work of Hollywood to tell some of these climate narratives. So I'd love to welcome our wonderful panel that we have coming out to talk a little bit more about LA Unified School District. So come on out, guys.
Well, thank you, Laura. Before we get started, I want to say congratulations to you for this really great day. I remember maybe 10 years ago trying to write a story about climate and education and looking for resources and really struggling to find them. And so to see this day come together and all the insights that come out of it is really remarkable and I think really important. So to pivot to the panel, as Laura said, this is about LA, it's about a celebration of LA. It's also an acknowledgement of some of the real challenges that LA faces with regard to climate and how that's shaped education. So we're going to start maybe by digging into that, and I'd love to just hear from each of you a little bit about the fires and how they impacted education in LA. So starting with you, Superintendent, of course, LA had more than a dozen schools across the region that were affected, either damaged or heavily damaged or destroyed by the wildfires, several of those in LAUSD. And then there are other challenges that come with wildfires, challenges for learning beyond just infrastructure damage. And so I guess I would just kick it to you very broadly. What was that experience like? How is the district faring?
Well, good afternoon, everyone. It's interesting. We are caught up between strong political fires alongside damaging real fires, right? And that's our reality these days. But the fires that impacted the area recently certainly didn't just impact the schools that you mentioned. And out of those, there were 3 that were really significantly damaged. One completely burned to the ground, one 70% burned, the other one 30% burned. The other ones were infected or impacted to a lesser extent, but the overall impact was felt in every school across our jurisdiction. And what I mean by that is it was not just the fire, it was the amount of particulate matter in the air, noxious fumes in the air, the fact that the fire started at a time when it propagated quickly as a result of hurricane strength level winds. And then it got worse because you were not just dealing with one fire, dealing with 3, 4, 5, at 1.6 different fires in different areas within the community with swirling winds whose predictability specific to speed and direction was compromised. The systems in our community to analyze and anticipate and forecast direction of smoke, I think were built for maybe 1 or 2 fires, certainly not taking into account the possibility of hurricane strength winds. So the system failed to provide, at that point, adequate information that would guide future actions. So we went to sleep at Tuesday at 1 o'clock in the morning, believing what we were seeing on a dashboard specific to air quality indices. And then by 5 o'clock in the morning, we woke up to something completely different. And that was also seen in Altadena, Pasadena, where the delayed response was a function of data interpretation that failed to produce. So obviously, we had to shut down the entire school system after initially shutting down a portion of our school system, particularly about 250 schools on the eastern band of our district closest to the Pasadena fire, the Eaton fire. The Palisades fire was much more focused in that area, impacting the Palisades, not really dumping smoke onto our city because of the direction that smoke took it directly westward towards the ocean. So the fires were terrible. However, from an environmental and health impact, the smoke, the particulate matter, the ashes in the air, the noxious fumes were actually a very significant issue that we had to deal with. After we shut down the district, before we reopened the district, we went through the extra expense of inspecting every school, changing every single school's filter to ensure decent air quality. In the areas closest to the fire, we actually did a lot of air testing, soil testing, before we returned communities. But then we still had about a dozen schools that were in mandatory evacuation zones while fires were still going on. But we were able to, as soon as we opened the school district back up, to relocate particularly the 2 elementary schools as a unit to other schools that had capacity. So all students, all teachers, leadership moved with the kids to ensure some degree of normalcy. Last thing I will say, in total about $625 million worth of damage to the infrastructure when you take into account air filtration systems, HVAC system replacement, modification, inspection. We're talking about a $1.2 billion impact to the school district, which, considering the current political structure in Washington, D.C., recouping those dollars through FEMA may prove to be somewhat difficult, but we are at the table discussing that right now.
Thank you for that overview. Samuel, I'll turn to you next, and you can introduce yourself briefly as well. It is on the board, but you can introduce yourself as well briefly. What was the impact for you as a student of the fires?
Well, of course. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Samuel, and I'm a sophomore at North Hollywood High School. And although I go to school in North Hollywood, I actually live in the Palisades. So during the fires, I did have to evacuate. And when I was there, I actually didn't even know I was at school that day. And I got a call from my parents right after school, and they're like, we have to pack everything, we're going. And so I didn't get a chance to go home. And so we immediately went to a hotel in North Hollywood, and for 2.5 weeks, we were just jumping around hotels. We went down to Orange County, actually, which was really great to just stay with my grandparents, but in the meantime, me and my sister were both missing school. And so that was something that really impacted me a lot. And then all the while, we're just getting reports from the Palisades, just news footage, and then I have friends in the Palisades I have a friend actually right near Palisades High School, and that was a high school that was severely impacted by the fires, as you were saying, Superintendent. And that was really just impactful to see what was going on over there. And then it was really heartbreaking just to see my community. And this is the same place where I went shopping with my sister, just going out there and seeing just the devastation. And so I'm back home now, thankfully, but my neighborhood still isn't recovered, and I know throughout LAUSD, students are still recovering from the smoke to the direct impact of the wildfires for a community in Palisades. It's been really tough, and I know a lot of my friends, some of my friends are still on Zoom right now, and so that's been really tough for them, 100%.
Yeah, such an important thing to recognize and talk about. And so, Jimmy, I would just want to turn to you as an educator. What were the challenges posed by the fire? How did you adapt to them?
Hi, everybody. My name's Jimmy Yu. I'm a teacher at Virgil Middle School. For me, I'll just recount that day of. I still remember it was a thick, heavy smoke. Luckily, let me rephrase that. Our school is in the heart of downtown LA. So fortunately, we weren't in the line of the fire itself. But like the Superintendent Carvalho mentioned, the particulate matter and air pollution was definitely noticeable. So, just that day, making sure everybody was evacuated safely and all the students got home safe to their families was already like a day with a lot of trials. But remember, in the end, education is a field that involves people, and there's a psychological impact of all this too. So besides a couple of days where we had to resort to remote learning, once the students came back, I know from my colleagues, a lot of my colleagues had to make sure their families were safe. So some of them were still out because they had to evacuate, or they lost like a lot their homes, or their family lost homes during the fire. So some of them, like, it took them a while before they could fully recover from that. And I know for at least me and my classes and some of my other colleagues, students were like keeping track of the containment percentage and always looking up like the updates on the news reports. So even if like schools return after 2 days, the psychological impact lingered on for much longer than that and disrupted learning in different ways.
Yeah, I want to turn to the great work that LAUSD is doing in just a minute, but I do want to pull on that thread about the psychological impact and ask you, Superintendent, you spoke very well about the infrastructure challenges, the financial impact, the health impact, but how do you manage as a district the psychological impact, the challenges with learning, and what are the lessons coming out of this for you?
Yes, I guess I think it's fair to say that the silent enemy here is really the trauma that kids and adults alike experienced, and the fact that that trauma may not necessarily manifest itself, reveal itself immediately after, or even during the incident. Sometimes it lingers and it will surface much later. That is why we took a number of immediate steps. First, knowing which communities were most impacted, we deployed additional psychiatric social workers, school psychologists, mental health specialists to really address their needs. We amped up awareness about our mental health virtual support systems, both for the families, the students, as well as the workforce. We ensured at a premium, but it was the right thing to do, that our workforce, particularly those who were directly impacted by the fires, meaning the 300 plus individuals who may have lost their home as part of our workforce, and those who had to be evacuated, even if they didn't lose their homes, that we would provide them time to normalize their lives at no cost to them. So we extended 10 days, up to 10 days of free time for these individuals to organize their lives. We also provided direct stipends of support, anywhere between $5,000 to $10,000 for the workforce. We deployed resources to the families impacted by the fire. So the schools where the students were relocated, particularly the two elementary schools, Marquez Elementary and Palisades Elementary, we relocated the totality of the 750 students to schools as close to the area as possible, Norris Dairy and Brentwood Magnet, as complete units, because we wanted the kids to have a sense of normalcy, continue to see their colleagues, their trusted teachers and principal. We also assigned additional mental health resources to provide support to those schools. And knowing that this is not going to be a short-term disruption, it's going to be a long-term disruption, even though we've made a commitment to rebuild those schools, we're adamant about protecting, to the extent possible, the integrity of the school. So we know, as you just heard from Samuel, some families had to move far away because they lost their homes. So the least we could do is actually go the extra mile and provide hold harmless provisions that, despite loss of enrollment, that the teachers, the counselors would be kept on site for those students. This is work in progress. I mean, we invited kids to write about their experience, to draw and paint about their experiences, to really be able to speak about what happened. We also held parent meetings, helping parents navigate these tough conversations with their kids, beginning by actually acknowledging that something terrible happened, but tomorrow's going to be better, and their family, their friends, their teachers are okay. And the school is a building. The true school is the community that moves education forward. And then we called on friends like the CEO of Disney, Bob Iger. I remember, over a coffee conversation, picking up the phone and say, how can we make these kids' lives that have been so disrupted better? And, Disney, magic, right? So they made incredible donations to the foundation to provide those incentives and those subsidies and those support systems. But they also brought the talent, and over 100 individuals from Disney, to really create days of magic where kids could just be kids and have fun with their colleagues. This happened last week. Actually, tomorrow at some point, In the morning, I'll be going to one of these schools that receive 400 kids from the Palisades for a magical day of just fun. And I think between fun, understanding, compassion, long-term listening, and providing the social emotional support and mental well-being support to both the kids, the families, and the workforce is exactly what they needed.
Yeah, there's so much there, and we could keep pulling threads, and we don't have time. But I do hope that you will find a way to put together these learnings for other places as well that go through this. As I was alluding to, it's very hard to find case studies, examples, and so I hope you think about ways to do that as things progress. I want to come back to you with one more question, this time pivoting a little bit. You've been thinking about climate in the district, long before these fires. In 2022, the district passed a climate resolution, that vowed to transform the teaching of climate change to meet the scale and urgency of the crises by implementing, infusing, and developing climate change education across all curricula and in every grade, pre-K to 12. One of the first things like this across the country, very, very big deal. How are you implementing that resolution in the curriculum?
So, I want to confess I came from Miami, where we were accustomed to having hurricanes. For those deniers out there that believe nothing is changing on Earth associated with a causality that begins with human behavior, just understand that hurricanes are not natural to Southern California. And I guess as I transitioned from Miami to Los Angeles, we had the very first near hurricane impacting Los Angeles. And then we had hurricane strength winds wrapped around the multitude of fires. Something is happening. And I think the board, in its policy wisdom, found it necessary and appropriate and timely to advance a resolution that would establish a way forward. And the most powerful and positive way of finding practicable solutions to climate change is actually through education, through awareness, beginning with the youngest amongst us. We see the dangers associated with attempting sometimes to educate older individuals who are set in their political ways that influence their scientific understanding. So the best protection against that is to begin the process early on. And how early is appropriate is, well, let's start with transitional kindergarten kids. So let me speak about the three specific areas that we have dared to implement practices that will systemically and forever change the way young people who will mature to young adults and adults, their perspective of their earth, what they can do, practices that they can modify, and an early sensitization to the climate. So first, clear adoption of standards for the teaching of climate literacy. Critically important. Professional development investments, multi-million-dollar professional development investments. Creation of a coursework both at the middle school as well as the high school level. High school level, specific to climate and environmental science. At the middle school level, dealing specifically with human impact on climate. Thirdly, if you want these things to happen in schools, come on, teachers, if you're going to ask them to do something else, pay them for it. So we established professional stipends of $1,800 per person to become climate champions, climate literacy champions at the schools. You're one of them. And then we created a leadership circle of sorts for the climate literacy champions, for them to discuss practices, obstacles, opportunities, research, convenings. In addition to that, we created awareness campaigns with parents through the Parent Academy, sensitizing the parents to what's being taught in school regarding climate and environmental science. And I think as an offshoot of this resolution and all that we began to do, we decided to actually do something that I believe no other district, at least of our size, had done, which was to create a new division at the cabinet level with direct reporting line to me by creating an eco-sustainability division with the first ever eco-sustainability officer leading that division. And it is that person's responsibility to not only ensure compliance with the resolution, but actually look at the system, the way we buy things, how we build schools, what we do in terms of practices, energy conservation, water retention, everything, where we spend money, companies, what is their carbon profile? And it is the eco-sustainability officer, and Crystals is here, he's the person, raise your hand in case somebody wants to talk to you afterwards. It is his responsibility to vet procurement processes, practices to achieve net zero carbon consumption and energy in our school system. So if you are going to be bold about these types of policies, put your money where your mouth is. You need to resource it adequately. You need to train people. You need to pay people to advocate the ideas. You need to make it part of the curriculum aligned with standards. And they need to create a community buzz with the parents of your children who are in school so they have an awareness too about what we're doing. I could say a lot more, like removing asphalt from schools, creating green spaces, shading, deploying air quality sensors on top of every single school that parents can monitor online. We've done a lot, but you know what? There's still so much more to do. But I think we are becoming the example for the country.
So Jimmy, I want to turn to you. I mean, just coming to that first point about your work as a climate champion, what is that experience like, taking these policies and implementing them in the school? You know, how do you do that as an educator?
The first step is to collaborate. Sorry. So in our the climate literacy champion meetings, we'd say over Zoom, we would first have times where we share what we're doing each school site. At the most recent meeting, teachers were sharing what they're doing for Earth Month, not just Earth Day anymore, it's Earth Month. And also just getting ideas from each other. And there's a whole bunch of resources that are provided through the Schoology group. Schoology is our main interface for our grade books and everything. And we're always trying to find ways to add more resources. Just recently, the Climate Literacy Champion Leadership Team had a meeting at the Broad Museum, and they have a brand new, beautiful curriculum they just developed for, I think it's called the Forest of Tongagar, which talks about the restoration, and it actually tries to define words used by the native indigenous languages. And those are wonderful resources I didn't know about until you're introduced to them. And hopefully we could share, plant these seeds that could grow into something more. And for me, it's like, it continues the work I used to do with the STEAM Collaborative, which is traditional teaching. You usually have the expert teacher in front of a class, and you have order. But with the new way we're trying to approach STEAM instruction, the ideal goal is the teacher's a facilitator. And we have to trust these kids because, they're gonna be the leaders one day. We want our kids to be like Samuel, a wonderful young leader who's gonna make change and advocate, but that requires some trust. So we usually give them a problem or issue, and we give them some tools and let them go with it and see what happens. That's the ideal look and scenario when one of these lessons for climate literacy works.
That's great. Samuel, I'm gonna come to you. First, sort of a two-part question here. So often we hear, I feel like in climate conversations, that young people are, the hope, they're the future, and of course, young people are the future, but that they give people hope. And it's often kind of a throwaway line. I'm curious, how are students at your high school feeling about climate change? And then to bring it back to the program and the curriculum we're talking about, how do the programs help empower students to take action? How do they help shape the way that your fellow students view climate change? How are they feeling about the curriculum?
100%. So I guess you, Jimmy, and then you, Superintendent, alluded to this, that the climate is our future. That's the world that we're going to inherit. And these policies, the ones that we're making through the school and on a national level, are the ones that are going to affect our lives. And so for, I think, a lot of students, and especially students in my high school, I know no matter what you want to go into, whether it's science or international relations, the climate is one of the major, almost talking points, and what really gives relevance to the curriculum. So I think for students, just looking at it, that's the major problem of our generation, and that's what we really need to devote ourselves to solve. But I think on the student side of things, we feel the extreme heat, we see the impact of the wildfires on our communities, and I think a lot of students, they see these changes, but they aren't necessarily connecting them back to the climate and what's really causing them. So I think there is a lot of awareness among the student population of the climate issue, but I think there needs to be more, 100%.
And how do you see the programs that we've been talking about? How do you see students engaging with them? Do you feel like that's helping provide that literacy for your fellow students?
Oh yeah, I think there are really two aspects of climate literacy, and climate literacy especially in LAUSD. And the first is really going out in the classroom, whether it's the science class, the math class, the history class, and really incorporating climate and climate literacy into the curriculum. And that really gives not only relevance to the curriculum, and it gives an opportunity for students to solve these problems, but it also gives them skills for the future and skills that they can apply to their future jobs. And it is our future. And now the second aspect of this is that us kids, we want to be part of the decision-making process. And I think being a part of the decision-making process starts with getting a seat at the table. And obviously, going up, a lot of high schoolers in LAUSD do have the voice and the voice to vote in national, local, state elections. So giving them this early civic engagement, and I think LAUSD, what they've been doing through the Student Empowerment Unit especially, and shout out to Dr. Franco in the audience, can you raise your hand? And Dr. Franco has been really instrumental in developing and coordinating the Student Empowerment Unit to really lift up student voices and make sure our voices are definitely heard. And so I started this year, and I wasn't involved in advocacy or climate literacy really before this year. And Dr. Franco entering into Superintendent Baca, who's the superintendent of Regions North, and entering to his council and having his ear and the support of Dr. Franco really got me involved in climate advocacy. And that's really what's been my stepping stone. And so I think on LAUSD part, it's really amazing that they're engaging young leaders and that they're engaging students to really make a difference.
Yeah.
And he's only a 10th grader. Imagine that.
Very impressive. So we have just a few minutes, but Jimmy, I want to ask you one more question. So if you just a relatively brief answer, but obviously teachers have a lot on their plates. It's a daunting job these days. How are you seeing teachers, educators engage with this? How is it, do they say, this is another thing I have to deal with? How do you get them engaged?
The main thing is like how you frame it. I don't know, my theory has always been it only takes a moment to change a life. And how do you fight for those moments that would awaken something in these kids? For teachers, you just have to be patient. Like, I'm a history teacher, and we just had we just went over Greek philosophy recently. Good old Plato's allegory of the cave. New ideas take time. There was a time for a long time, people thought the world was flat. But over time, patience, like, they slowly getting people on board, showing, unrefutable evidence. Eventually, it became the new truth. And that's what goes with this. Patience, planting those seeds, working with teachers slowly, and some communication with them. And if you create these experiences that they could join into, see the results, and what this means to kids, whether it's climate change, whether it's issues like immigration, the economy, whatever drives those passion and awakens something in that child, then I think they'll believe also, the teachers.
Yeah. This idea of patience, throughout the day we've been hearing about ways to use language to meet people where they are, to not necessarily assume a high level of literacy, but this patience, if this succeeds over time, literacy will grow, and it just strikes me as such a change for the climate conversation. One more question for each of you just to close this session, and this is something that we've been asking all day. In just 2 words, can you tell us what motivates you to act on climate change? And we can just go down the row. Okay, we can start with Jimmy.
For me, hope and like faith, because faith is, those are opposite emotions of fear. If you feel true hope, true faith in something, you do not feel fear, and you don't feel doubt.
Samuel?
Ooh, I guess to build off of what you said, I think two words that really embody the issue for me are community and future, because those are the things I'm fighting for.
Well said. For me, it's very simple. Samuel and Alex. Alex is my daughter, and obviously you just met Samuel. Shame on us, for those who actually have the power, the resource, the influence, if we fail to act with the level of urgency that this matter requires. Not for us, but for Samuel and my daughter, your children, and everybody else's child. For those who, you referenced the fact that up until a certain point in our collective history, there were people who believed that the earth was flat. There are people today who believe the earth is flat. There are people today who do not believe that somehow we have traveled to the moon. There are people today who deny the efficacy of a measles vaccine. There are people today. That's why education, wrapped around an urgent moment to achieve change through policy and practice, is the question for us if we care about Samuel and Alex.
Well, thank you to this excellent panel. Thank you.
Well, thank you so much.